Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Hit and Hustle from irishsportsdaily.com. I am Greg Flammang, as always, and for the first time, making his Hit and Hustle debut is our recruiting guru extraordinaire, Chrisitan McCollum, in the hat that I cannot find anywhere for anything. It is really frustrating. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. You got to talk to Rick Rick Kimball's the guy, man. And it's like, this is real hard to get. It's like, they're like Yeezys or something, you know, every time, hey, I can get you four. I can get you four. I can get you a couple here and there.
I
It's
know,
really
I
hard to
know.
get.
It's like my white whale at the moment.
Contrived scarcity here. We can start selling these things, really, for jack up the price. I've been trying to tell Rick to do that. Hey, just start selling these things. But I don't know. We'll see what we can do.
Put a link on the board, man. I got to get the hat.
These are like really like crafted. They're like crafted one by one. You know what I mean?
Oh wow!
He puts it in order and that's it. So we'll get you taken care of though. You know what? I think I got a couple here right here. Look at this.
What? You're sitting on a couple and I'm begging people. Oh my gosh! Oh my god!
And we've changed it up a little bit. This is like a different green. So maybe
upset.
we'll send one of these out.
I did not know this. I'm very upset.
And when I mean a couple, like a couple. This is what
I'm gonna bother you until I get some of those.
I think one of them is spoken for. I've sent out. I know some people had won one in our contest, and I believe I've sent them out and I sent messages. If I owe you a hat, tell me, DM me right away, because if not, I'm sending it to Greg.
All right, yeah, and I'm going to have to make something happen because I really want one of those hats. All right, to the business at hand. We got Christian here. He has emerged from the writing bunker. He has been writing stories for the last 24 hours. He has blocked off 30, 45 minutes, however long it takes for us to discuss the big recruiting weekend that just took place at Notre Dame with a ton of prospects, committed and uncommitted. First of all, so this was the first big like official visit weekend of the Marcus Freeman era. Tell me about, you've talked to a bunch of prospects just now, and you're going to talk to more today. You talked to a bunch yesterday as they left. Tell me about how they are taking in the vibe of what the Marcus Freeman kind of official visit experience is like. How did they experience it? What are they saying? What are they saying to each other? What are their families saying? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's important. We've noted this before, ever since visitors started coming in since Marcus was the head coach. The vibe has definitely changed, right? You start hearing it at first when kids would come in, and then a few people would say it, offer it up on their own. It's like, it's a thing. And then, a couple people you would have to ask about it. But once you asked, kids who visited maybe in the fall, who came back again in the spring, and it's definitely changed. It's just way more energy. People are happy, talking staff members, just the vibe around the program is almost, it's tangibly different. It's not obviously not tangible, but it seems that way where, everyone says the same thing. And, this staff, they do a tremendous job hosting visits, whether it's officials or unofficials. Like you said, this is the first major official visit weekend. But even going back the last few months, they have everything lined up. This is just really a well-oiled machine. And for the official visits, they went all out. I was just talking to a parent this morning, and, they said, we didn't want for a thing. They had everything set up for them. They knew where to go. Everything was very informative. They had the kids go one way, the parents go the other way. Talked to multiple parents throughout the weekend, and all of them said basically, by, the end of day one, everyone was like a family. There was no awkwardness. Everyone was together, and, all the kids really enjoyed it as well. And it just, they know what they're doing in terms of putting these weekends together. Everything's thought out. And it really does make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, the juice is real with this program right now. And they definitely do have a feel for how to reach people, right, where they need to be reached. Right. And they have a way to cater individually to players, but also kind of like the whole group. And it seems like they do put a ton of thought into who is going to be with who, how to, meet people. Like when you see Preston Zinter and Ronan Hannafin, like at the airport with the boombox and jumping around and stuff, like that's the pomp and circumstance for 2 3-star recruits, and obviously you have strong feelings about Ronan Hannafin. You've been posted. We'll get to him in a second, but it's just like that's the type of thing that they're doing for quote unquote less high profile, recruits on their board, but they're still going all out for all that sort of thing. And it's like I just feel like everyone talks about how genuine Marcus Freeman is, and he is at the front and center of everything. Like you see on social media, Marcus Freeman walking around with recruits, like hamming it up with recruits, hamming it up with parents and things. And I personally get a little bit tired of like the comparisons to BK and all those other things, but it is hard, especially at this time of year, not to make the observation. Like, look, even if the BK is just a different person, right? And Marcus Freeman is a different person. He's going to have his own way and that sort of thing. Marcus Freeman is like, this is why you hire him, essentially, like in a way, right? Like, obviously there's the football aspect, and he's a great defensive coordinator. He's a great football mind and everything, but this is what he brings to the program is unique, and you wouldn't have got it with any other coach. He is the one who brings all of this juice and all of this excitement. They obviously put a ton of mental energy into it. So, like you said, it's not tangible, but it feels like it is. Like, you can kind of feel it, right? Like you sense it's in the air. And so that's just notable. So it's great to hear that, the parents and the recruits are feeling that as well. Before we get into the individual players, I should bring up the super chat from Wayne Garrett, who it's for BD to admit Mountain Dew is awful. Happy Monday, everyone. Stay blessed. I don't know who BD is. BD is not on this show, but since he brought up Mountain Dew, what are your feelings about Mountain Dew, Christian?
Yeah, I haven't had a Mountain Dew since I was probably a teenager, unless and maybe there was like a college like hangover, and like the only thing in a vending machine was a Mountain Dew. That's all I can think of. But like, I don't want to say awful, because maybe if someone handed me one right now, I wouldn't say it was awful, but let's just say I haven't had one in a couple decades.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I haven't had a Mountain Dew recently either, but I do love them. And, as you get older, right, like you can't justify the calories of those things. And look, 0 calorie stuff, I get it. And these 0 sugars and all that. But that's not the real thing. If I'm going to go crazy, I'm going to have a real Mountain Dew. I think it's delicious, and I think it's delightful, and everyone should have one if they so choose. So that is my take on Mountain Dew. But let's get to the recruits, okay? So I want to start out with wide receiver, because Christian has, for the last couple of months, every time Ronan Hannafin gets another major offer, he posts it on the board and says, because the whole thing is, mid 3-star recruit, right? And he keeps getting offered by the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Ohio States and the Clemsons and all that stuff. Christian keeps pointing out, like, I wonder if people will be excited about him as a prospect yet. And this is a bit that's been going on forever. So tell me about Ronan Hannafin. Tell me how how you heard his weekend went and that sort of thing, where Notre Dame stands.
Well, let's be honest. It's more than just the skepticism, we'll call it, is more than just being a mid 3-star recruit. Right? It's being a mid 3-star recruit from Massachusetts, being a mid 3-star recruit from prep school in Massachusetts, and being a mid 3-star recruit who's a white kid from prep school in Massachusetts, right? And those are all things people will like to say, well, look at the past, blah, 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 these guys project. So some of that skepticism, especially, the level of talent he plays against, is understandable, right? You're watching kids from Georgia, you see Caleb Downs, he's playing against elite competition. You're watching Ronan Hannafin play, and you like what you see, but you're questioning whether or not, the competition is the same. That's fair. But when Notre Dame offers them, you say, okay, maybe they're reaching. Ohio State offers them, maybe they see something. But when Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, USC, LSU, Oklahoma, Georgia, they offer, it's time to realize, like, oh, these dudes all see something. So everything we've heard, Ronan's visit went very, very well. This is a kid who, I think the growing up a Notre Dame fan is legit, right? That's a true thing. He grew up, Notre Dame's kind of a dream school. But you'll notice as you're covering recruiting, these kind of dream school things, they don't really mean a whole bunch when you end up getting all the kind of opportunities someone like Ronan has. That stuff
Right.
kind of falls to the wayside. And what matters ends up being most important. So, yeah, he grew up a Notre Dame fan. He grew up a BC fan, too. All right. His dad grew up around the corner from, people who played for BC and Doug Flutie's in the neighborhood, that kind of stuff. So, BC's, he's scheduled to take an official visit to BC later this month, but I don't see them as a true threat. And, whether or not they were a school he grew up liking. And my thoughts, ever since Notre Dame offered Ronan in the fall, they were at the top of the list. I think at that point, if you're Ronan Hannafin, you get that offer, you probably start thinking, this is probably where I want to be. Then some bigger schools come in and offer, and you start thinking, okay, well, I should probably look at these other schools. But at no point did I ever think Notre Dame had fallen behind a school or a school had caught up with Notre Dame. He comes in and visits in late January, really, really likes it, probably starts to think there, like, all right, I've got some other options, but this feels like home. But who knows? He doesn't pull the trigger. He wants to go through the process. And still, more and more offers keep coming in. I was kind of joking at first with the whole, he's run out of big-time offers to get. But I'll be honest, the Georgia one last week, I think that was the last one. And that one really did, I really think he's out of them now. So he comes back this week, like you mentioned. He comes with Preston Zinser. One thing that I don't think is overstated is exactly how close those two are. Those guys aren't just buddies that know each other from the being in the same state. They played together in high school. Preston used to go to BB&N where Ronan is now. His freshman year, they played together. They also played together when they were in middle school. They played on elite teams together, and they're legit best friends. I mean, Greg, I don't know who your best friend is, but I can tell you my best friend, if he wants to work out at 5 o'clock in the morning, he's working out by himself. Okay. These guys wake up 5 o'clock in the morning and they work out when they can, when they're not in their own team stuff. That's real thing. It's a legit thing. And Ronan was at Preston's announcement. They don't go to the same school anymore. Ronan went to his announcement with his brother, with some other people that were supportive of Preston. I don't think there were very, very many people in that auditorium. I was there who didn't go to Central Catholic.
Yeah.
But Ronan made the trip over there. So I think that does matter. And coming out of the official visit, man, I think Notre Dame's gonna be hard to catch. I think Notre Dame is fearful of Clemson a little bit, or cautiously optimistic, but they're really wondering exactly where Clemson stands. Obviously Chancey Stuckey, played at Clemson, so he knows what Clemson has to offer. I think Dabo, can make a strong impression. But just for me personally, just my own opinion, I don't think it's going to be really hard for someone to top Notre Dame. But we'll find out more about exactly how Hannafin's visit went and where he stands now moving forward here today or early this week.
Yeah, I mean, you can make the case that Ronan Hannafin's the most important receiver, left on the board, just because of the offer list and who's after him and the type of skill set that he has. I thought he was. I think he's comparable to Chase Claypool in terms of what he can do. Like, a lot of people saw him coming out of Canada, was like, great athlete. Should he play defense? Could he play defense somewhere, like a rover or some type of defensive end or something like that, right? And I think Ronan is similar. I think he's a similar type of athlete. They have different builds, right? Like, I don't think Ronan Hannafin's ever going to be 240 or 238 or whatever it is. But I think they have similar type of explosiveness. I think they have similar type of physicality. And I think you see that in that Alabama's offered him as a defender, right? As someone who's going to play kind of like a hybrid safety linebacker role. And that's the type of athlete that you want, right? And you already have Braylon James in the class, and we're going to get to Rico Flores in a second, who also visited. And you just get these big-bodied athletes who can run, who are physical, who can, challenge teams from just like a physicality standpoint. And I think that's what Notre Dame is going to lean into as a program, with the offensive line and the running game and all those things. Like, they're going to try to beat people up, and Ronan Hannafin definitely fits into that, that kind of mold. Plus, like, I think he's like really fast. Like, he's got some really good acceleration. Like, everyone I watch him on film, like he can accelerate and he can run by people. Like, similar to like Chase Claypool, who was kind of, sneaky. Like, I don't think people knew that or thought that he would be like a low 4.4 guy. And I think Ronan Hannafin could do similar things
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning too. Ronan is being recruited as a receiver. Notre Dame wants him as a receiver, but everybody knows he could play multiple positions
Right.
and safety / linebacker. And you talked about that explosion. He's definitely explosive. I went to one of his games in the fall, and I joked with him and his mom about it recently. Like, he was trailing this tight end, was like running like a flag route, and he was behind him, and he was like behind him the entire way. And I don't know when he gets in front of him, but he picks off the pass. Right. And I'm like, how did you do that? And his mom started laughing. She's like, I don't know. And he just like all of a sudden he's right there. So definitely explosive athlete who could play. He could definitely end up at safety. I mean, he could be a Harrison Smith level safety potentially.
Yeah, just tremendous athlete. Like, and you look at Chase, like just another example, like special teams.
Oh, he killed
phenom, like killing it. And I think Ronan Hannafin, he could start out there and then just move on to another role somewhere. But like a huge prospect. So it's great to hear that Notre Dame is in really good shape for him. Let's keep it at wide receiver and transition to Rico Flores, because he's a guy who is from California, right? California receiver. Ohio State, Georgia are the other finalists for him, and he's gonna. Is he a July 4th or July 3rd? I can't remember when that commitment date was.
He's July 3rd, and I think Christian Gray is July 4th.
Got it. Okay, so he is a July 3rd or July 4th.
He's July 3rd.
July 3rd, right? Okay, so there's an open question about how hard Ohio State and Georgia are pushing right now. And this was a huge visit because Notre Dame is saying, hey, we're going to push hard. And, from reading your update on him, he spent a ton of time with Braylon James, getting to know him. This was his first time on campus. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. Okay. So, I guess tell me what you heard about him, where things are coming out of his official visit this weekend.
Yeah, so for me, like you mentioned, Georgia and Ohio State are the other finalists. He takes an official at Georgia this week and Ohio State the next week, and then he has his decision. To me, I'm not writing off Georgia, but from everything I've been told on multiple sides of the equation here, I don't know how hard. I don't think Georgia's going to push very hard. I don't believe they even went to go see him during the spring evaluation period. They've got a lot of other wide receiver targets in, and this is. From Georgia people, like, this is not like, oh, he's a plan B guy or he's not good enough for Georgia. It's just a numbers game, right? We see, you mentioned earlier, Notre Dame falls into these numbers games too. And I think Georgia's in the numbers game there where it's like elite level kid. You're going to bring him in for an official? Sure. You never know what's going to happen. But I think Georgia, that would be a very, very long shot in my opinion. Ohio State seemed like they could be nearing a similar position, right? But I think their board is very fluid. They've got, the one kid, then they probably got Noah Rogers. Brandon Inniss seemed like close to a lock to them. I don't think that's a lock anymore. It seemed like he really loved Alabama. The Carnell Tate saga has been going in and out for them.
Right.
Hard to understand. It seems like Carnell's leaning towards Tennessee. I don't think Ohio State's as full as they once were, or at least they're not as set as they once were. So I think this ends up coming down to a 2-team race, Notre Dame, Ohio State. This week like you mentioned, it was his first week there. Man, I'll tell you, so many kids I talked to mentioned Rico Flores. Like, hey, what other uncommitted guys, kids that were committed, uncommitted? It seemed like Rico was around everybody this week. I'm talking offensive linemen. We're talking about telling me what they thought about Rico Flores. Obviously, you mentioned Braylon James. I think a lot of it has to do, like you said, it was his first visit there. So these people, they were getting to know him, and they wanted to, take the time to show him around and show him what Notre Dame's about. Where maybe some other kids, like you mentioned, like a Caleb Downs, has already been there 4 times. They've probably seen him. The other thing I think is, like, a lot of these kids, they really, really like Rico, like, as a person. After getting to know him, they enjoyed hanging out with him. They also feel like Notre Dame would do wonders for him. Like, he's the kind of kid who, would get so much out of Notre Dame, and they see that and they want that for him. So Braylon James especially. I mean, he told me, I was messaging with him last night, and he said, me and him are so similar, but we come from such different backgrounds, but we're like brothers. So that really, really means that they were together, from what I've been told, essentially all weekend. And Notre Dame feels really, really confident about Rico Flores at this point. Not to the point where, sometimes we say that and it's almost like, the kid said he's coming.
Right.
He's just taking these. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. I just feel like Notre Dame feels like they're in a really, really good spot here They feel like they hit it, what they needed to do. And I think Rico and I think he traveled with his mom and maybe his uncle. I think they saw what Notre Dame could do for him, and it really just checked all the boxes. And like you said, these other schools are they're in a tough position in terms of numbers. Notre Dame is not. I mean, they are kind of, but Rico's a guy. They want him, and they made that very, very clear to him. And he told me he feels like a priority for Notre Dame, and that's a big deal.
Right, like priority plus team fit plus enjoyed the visit. Like anytime you have especially a California kid, because it's just a different thing, out here, and so anytime they're going for the first time, you never quite know, right? And so when you get him on campus and they apparently love it, and then they start to vibe with their team, their classmates and that sort of thing, and the current roster who's hosting them, that's going to be a hugely important piece of it. And just like the fit with, I think, all the other receivers too, because I think the thing about all these receivers is you could see all three playing. I don't know. There you go. You could see all three. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. You can see any of the receivers playing all three positions, right? So there's no one, slotted into one particular place. Because, Jamie and I are always talking about big slots and that sort of thing. And obviously Ronan Hannafin and Braylon James and Rico Flores, like they all have that size, right? And they're going to bring in Christian Hamilton at a later date this in June, where he's probably more of a slot, but it's not like none of the rest are locked into a particular position, right? And then I think vibing with them, obviously, it's like a hugely important thing. Rico Flores is a plan A take, right? Yep. And that's not necessarily the case with other programs, right? So yep. I think that's going to play a huge part. And so the fact that, check the box of made the visit, vibed with the team, everything went great. So things are going to be looking way up on Rico Flores.
And been a take, right? So this isn't like, we missed on this guy. I mean, for months now, even when like he went to Ohio State and like I loved it. Ohio State's going to be hard to beat. Notre Dame was then like, we think we got a shot at him and we want this kid. So not like a down the board target by any means.
Right. So big. And even when Rodney Gallagher, right? Like he had a spot even when they were going after Rodney Gallagher. So that's probably going to be very important for him. Let's switch over to defense a little bit and go over to Louisiana linebacker Jaiden Ausberry, who is pretty famously 15, 20 minutes away from LSU's campus. I think his dad who played at LSU, or he had family who played at LSU.
His dad played at LSU. His dad's an executive in the LSU athletic department.
Right. Okay.
But he had 15, 20 minutes away might be his house. His high school is across the street.
Oh my. Okay. So, but his brother went to Auburn last cycle. And so the word is that Jaiden is looking to also, spread his wings and go somewhere other than LSU as well. Or at least that's an option, a heavy option at that. So tell me where things stand with him, because I know, he earlier in the off season, he had come up and it seemed like he was starting to wrap his mind around the fact that Notre Dame might be the move. What did this official visit do for that kind of mindset for him?
Yeah, just going back a little. So people might remember him and his brother Austin, 2022 safety. They came up to ND in June of last year, right? It was kind of like, I think it was the very first day kids could come back could make visits after COVID, and they were there. And what we heard from everyone, SEC country, including Louisiana, was these kids are probably going to go to LSU. They're from Baton Rouge. They go to University Lab. Dad freaking played for the Tigers, works for the Tigers. Probably going to go to LSU. But if there's a school, it'd be Notre Dame. So fast forward, like you said, Jaiden comes back. Now, he was supposed to come for junior day in like January. They pushed that back literally just so he would have more time with the staff. So when people move visits like that, that shows you're thinking, and that's a serious consideration. So heading into this visit, what I had heard, and it was coming up, but it was getting more and more concrete, was that, like you said, definitely kind of looking at other options other than LSU. And for a variety of reasons, you want to blaze your own path. Maybe, it can kind of be awkward going to a school where your dad's, executive. Is this kid playing just because his dad's such and such, that kind of stuff. But he came out of that spring visit really, really feeling the vibe. Like you talked about the difference. He's one of the people that mentioned the vibe of Notre Dame being different. Al Washington was recruiting him big time at Ohio State. They had a really, really good relationship. Marcus Freeman was his lead recruiter before Marcus Freeman became head coach. Those were his two favorite coaches. Now all of a sudden they're together, and one of them is the head guy. So that makes a big difference. So he came up, loved that visit. This weekend, same deal. I mean, he really, really just saw everything like in terms of X's and O's, I think was brought out a little bit more this time with Al Golden.
Yeah.
Both he and Zinter mentioned all the experience they have at linebackers on that staff. You talking about Al Golden, James Laurinaitis, Marcus Freeman, Chad Bowden, Brian Mason works with them. So there's just a focus on linebackers where the linebackers are like, look around like, man, we are really going to be featured and we're going to be developed. And he's a Notre Dame kid. He's very much a Notre Dame kid. Had a chance to get around so many of the other commits. And I talked to a source today, and he was like, oh, we get Ausberry. Now, I think the thing that can kind of complicate things is he's still leaning towards a December decision. What does a December decision mean? Does that mean a December announcement? He took a visit official to Auburn last weekend, Notre Dame this week. He goes to A&M next, and then he goes to Michigan. Now, he said maybe he won't use that fifth official visit in the fall. Sounds like those are his top four then. Doesn't even know if there's another one he'll take an official.
Right.
I mean, maybe he'll use it to LSU. But, is he a kid that will, silently commit and just wants to make his announcement in December? I think Notre Dame probably would be okay with that. It's a long time to wait. But, this is a family that's been through it. They're not playing games, right? They're not, we're running around here seeing this. The dad knows what he's doing. They've already been through this process once. So it seems like a family that you could kind of take their word on stuff. But I think Notre Dame's right way towards the top of his list.
It feels like of all the players who hypothetically, we're not reporting this, but of all the players who could hypothetically give a silent and then wait till December to decide, it's him, because I feel like he has a spot that's kind of locked up in that, like Jordan Hall?
Jordan Hall, yep.
Yeah, so he just committed to Michigan State, and that was the other linebacker that they were after. And so they just, he just committed. It doesn't seem like they're really in on any other linebackers for this spot. So if Jaiden Ausberry tells them, like, hey, I'm coming, let's say he tells them in August, say, hey, I'm coming, I'm going to, whatever, I'm not going to go on any more visits, I'm going to sit on it, and we'll announce in December. He's probably pretty safe to do that, because it's probably at that point, it's him or no one at the linebacker spot, because they don't really need to, because they've loaded up on linebackers. So I could see that happening. This is a guy plus I think it's worth it, because I think he's that good of a player. I just love his game. I love his game in this defense. And just like you said, what other school can offer? The head coach is Marcus Freeman, who is a linebacker himself, coached linebackers, and is like a phenom in the coaching industry. Then you have Al Golden, who just coached linebackers for the Super Bowl runners-up. And then you have James Laurinaitis, who played linebacker at Ohio State and was like an All-American. So it just seems like that kind of trifecta really plays into what, Notre Dame is pitching here. And the fact that he's been so many times, right? Like, this is clearly a player who is interested in Notre Dame, like real interest, and and the next player that we're going to get to is in a similar light. Who I'm just gonna put it up here.
I already know what he's talking about.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'm a safety guy, as everyone knows. I'm big on safeties, and Caleb Downs is just phenomenal. He's a phenomenal player, and I'm not even like, I don't know if I'm like cautiously optimistic about him or whatever. I think I'm just trying to will it into existence. But he is a guy who it seems like is just destined to play for Georgia or Alabama, right? Like, it just feels like that. Guys like him they always end up at those schools. And yet, like, we talk a lot about behavior with someone like Dante Moore, right? Like, everyone's talking about follow not what he says, but what he does, right? Okay, so if we take that same kind of track with Caleb Downs, keeps coming back to Notre Dame, not just this visit, right? But like, so Richard Young, for example, was a running back who's going to visit, I think today, right? His visit starts today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he never been to Notre Dame. First time to Notre Dame. It's an official, right? Caleb Downs has been to Notre Dame 3-4 times prior to this official visit.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. With all that in mind, I want. Tell me where they stand. Just keep in mind, like, keep my feelings close to your heart right here. Okay.
You're talking about trying to will into existence.
I'm trying to will it into existence.
I think Chris O'Leary is trying to do the same thing. If you're okay, I agree Notre Dame has a good shot. But if you're okay just getting to this point and then just putting themselves in this position and giving a shot, even if it doesn't work out, you can thank Chris O'Leary for that, because he's the one. I don't think without Caleb's relationship with Chris O'Leary, it goes this far. Every time I talk to Caleb, he's kind of a low-mannered dude, right? Yeah, he's very polite, but he just doesn't get very excited. You mentioned Chris O'Leary to this guy, he gets fired up. Okay, you can tell. And he was telling me yesterday, I said, how'd it go? What coaches you spend time with? And, he mentioned, I spent time with Coach O'Leary, and he kind of brightens up. We played a bunch of games, and before you ask, I beat him at everything we played. Right. So I'm like, all right, what'd you beat him at? He's like, I beat him at bowling. I beat him at cornhole. And he's like, this guy, it was real good to beat him at bowling. But that just goes to show you the relationship they have, right? They're talking trash. They're going back and forth. And it's like, it's real. It's not forced, right? We talked about how genuine a guy like Marcus Freeman is, and Chad Bowden and those guys. Chris O'Leary falls in that same category, right? So that's the reason he's been up here. And also beyond O'Leary, he really, really understands what Notre Dame can do for him after football. He understands football was not going to last forever. He's got a brother right now who's killing it at North Carolina, so he knows what's going on. He understands the whole game of it. But Notre Dame, the long term, and I ask him all the time. All these, you got Ohio State, got Georgia, got Alabama in there. How does Notre Dame fit? And he'll just tell you. I keep coming back for a reason. I got nothing bad to say about him, and I don't think any of these schools think he's a lock, right? I think a lot of people probably think Georgia.
Yeah.
I talk to Georgia people. They're like, he's no lock to Georgia. Georgia's going to have to fight for him going against these schools. He's a kid that could go out of state, right? You mentioned Alabama. Well, Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame. There's one of those is different. And sometimes it's good to be the answer to the SAT question. Sometimes it's not. I tend to agree with you in terms of when you're at school that he keeps coming to, I think it's kind of good to be the SAT answer there, the one that's different from the rest of them.
Yeah, and so the general rule in recruiting is, like, if you come into an official and you're not the leader, and you have the perceived leaders, after your official, if you don't leave as the leader, then you're behind, right? Like, that's just conventional wisdom. I do think this is a little different in that he does have an itch. It is there. He keeps coming back. And it's just like, I think it really helps that Kyle Hamilton was just on campus, right? Like, you can see, okay, this was a top safety from my state who came to Notre Dame, who became an All-American, started playing right away. And I don't know that NIL is like going to be a super big thing for Caleb Downs, but like, look what Kyle Hamilton was able to do NIL wise, in that it wasn't he didn't get the bag. It's like he created a brand for himself, got a bunch of other kind of endorsements where he got to do things that he was interested in and into. And that's kind of like the poster child for what NIL is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that sort of thing is important to Caleb Downs. And then he goes and gets a pick 14th,
mm-hmm.
right? And he just signed a contract for $16 million or whatever it was. So, like, there it is right there. Like, you can't say Notre Dame can't do the things for me that Alabama can or Georgia can, because Kyle Hamilton got selected ahead of the Georgia safety.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Hamilton got selected ahead of the Alabama guys, right? So, like, that is the pitch. And then you get the education behind it, right? So that's the pitch. Also the pitch is you can play with Peyton Bowen, and you can play with Adon Schuler, and be the best safety trio in all of college football for the next 3-4 years or whatever, right? To me, that's like, in all seriousness, that is a winning message to send to somebody, and it's just a matter of his comfort within the school. But like Notre Dame has like a lot of things going for it. That and like you said, the answer to the SAT question, like they're different. They're different than any other place.
And I'll say this in terms of, you talked about you want to come out as the leader. He's a very thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
Very thoughtful. I asked him straight up, all right, where does Notre Dame stand coming out of the official? Not so much pressing them to say, are they the leader or are they?
It's a question you got to ask, right?
Yeah. So where does Notre Dame? It's usually pretty general. You kids usually say, oh, I really like them. They're up there. He said no comment. Now, I don't know, read into that what you want. He said no comment. And the other thing that you mentioned in terms of, I think the recruiting part is the calendar is changing a little bit. I was talking to a guy last night at another school, and basically he said, listen, everything's going to be shut off July 1, and then, there's dead period, and then people get into their seasons. This is like halftime. This is almost halftime, especially if you got a guy that's, although Caleb said he wants to have a decision soon, like after his last official.
The next 2 visits, yeah.
Yeah. But there's still a long way to go in these recruiting battles.
Okay, you've done it. Yeah, I feel good. You did a good job there.
I'll tell you off air that he's going to Georgia though, so just to get you. No, I'm kidding.
Don't you do it? No, I feel good about it. Let's stay in the secondary here with another super important player at cornerback, Christian Gray, who.
You've been watching too much 50 Shades of Grey. That's an A in there in that. Christian
Did I? I knew I did it wrong. Hold on. Let me switch it. I always get it wrong. Like I feel like it's right, and then I mess it up. All right, here we go. All right, there it is. All right, A. All right. So trending very strongly Notre Dame earlier in the offseason. Then his high school coach moves over to LSU. And is now the cornerbacks coach over there. And that seemed to kind of just open up the entire recruitment just a little bit more, right? Mm-hmm. So then Ohio State got involved, then USC got involved. Tell me where it is now, because I was talking to you earlier. It seems like it might be trending back to Notre Dame. So why don't you
Yeah, I think Notre Dame was way ahead, talking the winter, in right before the end of the season, before the BK stuff. And then I think he came right back. He was one of the only underclassmen that came back that weekend when they brought all the commits back for their extra official visits. Christian Gray was back on campus then, and it seemed like one of the kids that potentially this could be a positive for Notre Dame, right? You mentioned then they hired Robert Steeples, not just his high school coach, right? He only coached, I think he coached Christian for, I think it was probably Christian's freshman year. Not just his high school coach, like a real mentor though, going beyond to middle school, his guy. I mean, that's a big deal. And don't think that Brian Kelly just hired Robert Steeples for Christian Gray. I mean, Brian Kelly's been high on Robert Steeples for years.
Right.
So
he was looked at Notre Dame.
Yeah. He was up a candidate when they hired Mickens. So that really did kind of open things back up, right? And you mentioned that LSU and then USC got involved in it. I don't think Notre Dame ever lost a lead. I think Notre Dame I think some schools made it close, or maybe they're co-favorites and stuff like that. But I think in the weeks leading up to this visit, I think Notre Dame was, again, starting to create some distance. And from everything we hear, they created some serious distance this weekend. Now, he goes to USC next week. USC's having some Thursday. They're bringing guys in on Thursday. Then he goes to Ohio State. For the last week, he'll be there that same weekend with some of the other guys we were talking about. And then he's the July 4th announcement. Just seems like it's going to be hard. I mean, he's a real bright kid, really he likes to have a good time, and he's just happy. And I think that new vibe at Notre Dame we were talking about earlier, I think that might have impressed him as much as anybody else. And I think where Notre Dame stands, it's hard to imagine wanting to be a different program right now in the Christian Gray race than Notre Dame.
Yeah. Super important player. He's got the size, got that kind of Cam Hart kind of size you want on the boundary and that sort of thing. And they've been after him for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. So it's clearly a one top of the board guy. And so it's good, trending positively for him. Get Micah Bell on campus. Get Josiah Wagner on campus. See if we can round out the corner class. So that's really good. Moving on to Jason Moore, the defensive lineman, top 50 player. out of DeMatha in Maryland. So where are things with him? It's been kind of quiet for him. Kind of quiet kid.
Yeah, he is a quiet kid. Another very, very polite kid.
Yeah.
And, it's just I think Notre Dame's always had his attention for years. I feel like this kid, I've been talking to this kid longer than anybody else in the class. And he just had issues getting out. He didn't take a lot of visits. Finally got out to Notre Dame in the fall for a game. Really, really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when the Al Washington hire was made, that's when Notre Dame really just shot. He made Jason Moore such a priority, and the other commits in the defensive line room, the class, have already made Jason Moore such a priority. Tweeting out those graphics, missing puzzle piece, all that. That stuff has really, really hit home with Jason. So coming into this visit, I think Notre Dame should be considered the favorite.
Yeah.
And coming out of it, I don't think there's anything that's happened that's going to change that. He's a kid. He's been through this process. His family's been through this process in terms with his brother, Justin, who's a star basketball player at Villanova right now. So they've been through this process before. They know what it is. He goes to Michigan next and then Ohio State again. Already went to Penn State. So that's like the quartet of Midwestern powers right there going at it right now between Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. And I think Notre Dame, again, it's hard to imagine wanting to be a different school other than Notre Dame right now in this race.
Yep, and that would be the capper of maybe the best D-line class. I honestly, I couldn't even say. Like, I 92, 1990 or something, right? Like it's so, honestly, it's so far back. It's like you can't even like make a solid comparison because you don't know what it was like when they signed, right? You only know the outcome. Mm-hmm. But it certainly since the services era, I can't remember a better defensive line class, and it would just be unbelievable.
Not a coincidence that it happens when Al Washington's first year. I mean, that's not a coincidence.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, when he was name was floated, we did a show with Jamie, and he was like, Al Washington is an elite recruiter, and he has shown it, right? He hasn't been on campus for that long, and here we are sitting here with just a banger defensive line haul that would only be capped off by Jason Moore. So that looks really good. Let's move over to the offense. Monroe Freeling, the top 100 offensive tackle from is it South Carolina, right?
He's a South Carolina guy.
Yeah, right.
Our North Carolina commits.
Right. Okay, I did have that right. So it's interesting because we are now in a position where Notre Dame has 4 committed, and the top 2 on the board, I guess ranking wise, are still sitting out there. So, Notre Dame is going after both as hard as you can. People ask about, can they take 6? I don't know. Like, that's just sitting here talking about it. 6 seems like a lot, but as long as they're pushing for both, it's you just have to say like, okay, like they're pushing for both. And so wherever the chips fall, maybe Notre Dame doesn't even know how the chips are going to fall, but tell me about the visit, right? Like, is that still, how did he come out of that visit?
Yeah, he's kind of a quiet guy, and he doesn't say too much. So everything we've heard was good so far. But like you said, I think I don't know if you mentioned, but the other guy they're looking at obviously is Charles Jaguza. 6 is a lot, but man, saying no to one of those guys, that seems a really, really difficult thing to do.
It's wild.
Yeah. And Freeling is seriously interested in Notre Dame. We talked about people, we've talked to people. I know he's going to Florida next, and I think he's going to Miami after that. Obviously, Clemson's in the mix there. Everyone we talked to, they the one consistent, it's almost like everyone's afraid of Notre Dame, right? So like Florida, like, oh, I don't know. They think Notre Dame's on top. Clemson's like, oh, they think they're going to have a battle with Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's the consistent school that's up there. Another kid that's been to Notre Dame multiple times. And I remember speaking to Monroe before his first visit, and he wasn't even being shy about it. He was like, Notre Dame's on top. Coming into his first visit.
Yeah.
Obviously, this was I think it was probably a full year ago. But Notre Dame's done nothing to harm themselves there. They've kept it. Obviously, other schools have, made their pitches and kind of opened his eyes. But Notre Dame's still right there. I think he was a guy that was really impressed with Jeff Quinn. And I think he's been even more impressed with Harry Easton given his resume. So I don't think that hurt him in any way. But like you said, 6 is a lot, but so is trying to say no to one of these guys. And I think that, it sounds like, from talking to Matt, sounds like Notre Dame, they might like him even more after this weekend from a Notre Dame standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. It's looking in a vacuum, great player. It's a great situation to be in that he's, apparently Notre Dame is apparently in really good shape. The leader, he's talking about committing late, right? Like he's not going to pop anytime soon, right?
He's talking about a fall guy, right? And that
which is kind of part of the problem.
Yeah. Yep. So it's like, I think part of it is, what I was told is for him, he wants to see how these teams play in the fall, right? So like, does that matter? Can you show him what we've done and how it's not going to change? Maybe you can get him in the fold beforehand. But I also think he might have been a guy that was like, I have the, given all the offers I have, I can wait. And it seems like a player of his caliber usually can, but it's individual in each school, right? And I know Florida's in the same spot. Florida's in a similar spot where they got guys coming in and they might not be able to wait. So maybe he starts to see, oh shoot, these spaces, these spots that I thought, we're going to be open, they might not all be open. But again, maybe Notre Dame does take 6. Who knows?
Yeah. So before we move on, I want to get to a couple of the committed, or at least one of the committed players who are on campus. There were a ton of committed players on campus. We're not going to hit on all of them here. We're mostly focusing on the uncommitted guys. But if you want updates on, all of the committed players and everything, go to irasportsdaily.com. Christian and Matt are writing a ton of stories on everybody. Guys like Don Schuler and Sam Pendleton, Braylon James. You just posted on Braylon James. So check out those guys. It sounds like everyone had a really good time as expected. I did want to talk about Peyton Bowen real quick because obviously he's the degree to which his commitment is firm is up for debate. So where do you think Notre Dame stands there?
I think he really likes Notre Dame and always has. And, right. I've heard interviews with him talking to other outlets covering other schools, which I always think is telling. Some of these kids kind of want to just say what they want, but he always speaks with great reverence of Notre Dame. It's clear the reasons he committed to Notre Dame are still there. Now, that being said, Oklahoma and Texas A&M, they're pushing really, really hard. And I think those are the two schools that Notre Dame needs to be worried about. And I think that's the schools that, for a good reason. But, the whole family, it seems to be like a family affair with Notre Dame. And I think that, they're going to fight. They don't think they have this thing wrapped up, and they're not going to, get lazy on it. But I think they're going to be able to hang on to them.
Good. That's what we want, because I got a comment in here. Let me find it. He was asking about who I like the best. And all right, from Andy Hoffman, talking about, does Greg like Downs or Bowen more? Schuler's great too. There's the thing. They're like children, these safeties. I don't make preferences. All the safeties are great. And it's like, I want all of them. I want all three, right? You don't want to pick and choose. I honestly, I think Bowen and Downs are actually very similar players. I would say that Downs is a little bit more dynamic against the run. I'm coming 150 miles per hour to fill the hole, close fill the gap and that sort of thing, run the alley. That's basically it. I think they're both fantastic. I think they're both really good athletes, ball hawkers. And Schuler is getting bigger now. So that, like, there was a size question. I think that's kind of gone. It's just, please get all three and, get them all on the field at the same time. All right, let's wrap up the show with just 2023 quarterbacks. And I'm kind of going to put CJ Carr into that conversation too, because I know that there's been a reclassification question come up. Christian reported last week that, when I say he reported, he asked CJ Carr directly, are you going to reclassify? And CJ Carr said no. And then you posted an update on Dante Moore and what all that means. Just kind of tell me where you think things are today, June 13th,
Yeah.
on that situation.
Well, I see my guy Mike Scarborough, LSU Tiger Bait in the chat, and he's probably anxiously awaiting this question as well. Yeah, so I think Notre Dame was ready to move on from Dante Moore, and or ready to not move on from him, but ready to start looking in other directions in addition to him.
Yeah.
And now I believe that maybe they're not ready to completely close the door on Dante Moore just yet. And now it's hard to understand all the things that are moving behind the scenes and to make all the puzzle pieces fit. But Notre Dame certainly put a lot of time and effort into the Dante Moore race. Seems like one that, you might not want to just throw all that stuff out the window. I can tell you from Dante Moore's side of thing, there was a big scramble going on after last Sunday when it became clear that CJ Carr, or Monday, whenever it became clear that CJ Carr was headed to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
There was panic. There was like, they were hearing the same reclassification rumors. So I talked to guys that are really close to Dante Moore. They're like, I'm trying to find out what's going on. What do you got to tell me about what's going on with Dante Moore? We're hearing CJ may take his spot, right? And one of the things I was told was like, they love Dante, right? So I know fans can be really annoyed by the way this process has gone out, right? They were expecting him to commit to Notre Dame, not taking visits. They see the kid take visits. It can be frustrating for fans. I totally understand that. But at the same time, every single person I've talked to about Dante Moore just goes on and on about how great of a kid he is.
This is within Notre Dame now.
Everyone, right?
Everyone.
So Notre Dame, other, people that are around him personally, people that have dealt with him.
Okay.
Nobody has ever told me anything bad about Dante Moore as a kid. So the guy I was talking to basically said, like, he is such a great kid. He's done everything that he's been asked to do. He's put in all this work. Doesn't he deserve to go to the school, have a chance to go to the school that he wants to go to? Basically, this is when it's up in the air. Is CJ going to reclassify? Is Dante's spot gone? And so it's not like we're too big. We're too, if you want to go ahead, good luck. I think that probably that feeling got back to Notre Dame, and it kind of helped them understand just how serious he is. And, so we'll see how this all shake out. I mean, there's a lot of different ways it can shake out. I wouldn't feel comfortable predicting any of them. Dante Moore comes in Notre Dame. Notre Dame gets Dante Moore and CJ Carr. CJ Carr is the 2023 quarterback. Someone else that we don't even know their names, the 2023 quarterback. I think that, or they don't take one. I mean, I guess that's probably the least likely, but I don't think that's crazy. So, this 2023 quarterback, the idea of where it goes in this situation is extreme. I would say it's definitely fluid. I think that this is a thing that I don't think Notre Dame knows how it shakes out.
Intrigue, that's the name of the game in recruiting. And I tell you, it's similar with offensive line, right? Where you have this problem where it's like, oh, we have these two great players, and do we have spots for them? And look, I guess it's a situation that Notre Dame hasn't been in, and they have now put themselves in this position, and I think that's this is another term that I don't like, but big boy recruiting, right? Like you have to make these types of decisions with elite prospects, and you just have to see how it plays out. The idea, and I read your update last week on Dante Moore, and I was just like, I get it, but the idea of stopping recruiting him is just kind of crazy. Like, what are we doing here? He's a top 10 quarterback, like top 10 overall. Like, what are we talking about? So let's just let it play out. I don't even want to get into about the strategy or whether it was smart until I know actually what happened. But
there's so many things behind the scenes that, even the reporters or everyone just not privy to, right? Yeah. So it's hard to really just say, well, then they should do this, they should do that. Like if it doesn't all add up and everyone can't figure out all the pieces, like there's missing things. Don't think you're crazy and don't think this doesn't make sense. Like we probably don't have all the pieces to that puzzle.
Yeah. And here's the thing too. And this is where I don't really love giving a staff just full carte blanche on like criticism or anything like that, right? Because look, everything gets evaluated, right? But at the same time, because of the amount of work they put into it, because of the amount of thought and care that goes into every recruitment, it's easy to say like, okay, let's just, I don't want to say trust them, but let's see where it goes, because clearly they've thought it over and are doing what they think is best in the moment, right? So let's see where it finishes, and then we'll evaluate it from there. And look, it's early June still, so there's a long way to go, no matter where it happens. But
understand this: Notre Dame is in the business, and I had a guy tell me this directly when it was about this whole situation. Notre Dame's in the business of recruiting the very best players in the country and getting them to go to Notre Dame. That's their goal when they're recruiting, right? They're not, there might be frustrations on their end, whatever. Trust me, they're big boys. They're not going to do anything to sabotage themselves. They want the very best players. They want this quarterback situation to work out the very best way for Notre Dame, and that's their goal. So even if you don't have all the information behind it, just trust that that's what they're trying to do.
Boom. That's a good way to end it. Christian, thanks for coming on, man. Everyone who's in watching the show today, thank you very much for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. We're going to be doing more shows throughout the summer. I'm going to try to get Christian almost weekly because he has a ton of good information. I don't have my day job anymore. It's summer, right? So I have a break here. So I'm going to be doing a lot more shows with Christian and Jamie. I'm going to wrangle Matt on a show. And we'll get him to spill some beans and that sort of thing. Head over to irishsportsdaily.com. Like I said, there's going to be a ton of information, not just, on the uncommitted guys, but the committed prospects. We're going to have a ton of previews for next weekend's visits, Richard Young's visits going on right now. So you're going to want to check out the update on that. I will have Jamie on later this week. We'll probably do some kind of a preview with, the upcoming weekend. If anything is, recruiting news or anything like that, I can hit it up with Jamie. Then we can do some evaluations, that sort of thing. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. If you haven't been on the show before or haven't tuned in, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Really help us out. Christian, thanks for coming on, man. It was awesome. Thanks for all the work. You guys are doing a great job. You and Matt, everything's going good. So
thank you, Greg. Thanks.
Absolutely, boss. I'm going to hit you up for one of those hats too. So, okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll talk to you soon.